Hi there. Welcome to the Dietary Restriction Kitchen. I'm Nat Ryan. Today in the kitchen, I'd like to share with you a treat that I make for my family once a year. And I like to make it for Canada Day, which is celebrated here in Canada on July 1st. It's quite similar to the American Independence Day on July 4th, a little bit different, but it is our national holiday to celebrate Canada and our sovereignty on being uniquely Canadian. And so so that's what we do every year on July 1st. And what I like to make that one time a year is homemade strawberry shortcake for my family. So I use fresh strawberries, right? And, it's going to be delicious, but back in the day when I could eat whatever I wanted, I could just buy some shortcakes at the store. I could bake off some myself and I didn't have to worry, just use the regular ingredients. But now that I have to be dairy free and gluten free and all of those things, then I've had to adjust all that. So I'd like to share with you how you can make something like that, like a classic shortcake in our case today, but adjust it so that you can make it gluten-free and dairy-free. So it's going to be fun and it's going to be delicious. So let's get started. Okay, so before we get really into it, I'd like to go over a few of the ingredients that we'll be using, specifically the ones that are gluten and dairy-free. So of course, obviously the strawberries, they come a little bit later. Delicious part of that, but yes, we're going to need some flour, right? So an all-purpose flour. What I like to use is Bob's Red Mill gluten-free 1-to-1 flour blend. I find it's one of the best ones. I've used a lot of different ones, but that's the one I find the best. We're going to need to make it's almost like a pastry, but like a short pastry. So what we need to do is usually you use butter for that. If you have to be dairy-free like me, you can't use regular butter. So I've used this, and it's a plant-based butter, sort of butter. I use the term loosely, but yes, and it works very much like butter. It comes in the sticks, so it's individually wrapped. So I haven't even opened this pack, but it's individually wrapped sticks. And so almost like you get butter for baking, like that. See, so it's like this, right? So we're going to use some of that, right? So it'll behave like a butter in the baking, but it isn't butter and it has no dairy in it. So we're going to use that. And another thing that we need for the recipe is a sour cream. Now, obviously sour cream has dairy in it too. So what I like to use, sometimes it's hard to find a dairy-free sour cream. What you can use is a yogurt. And so what I like to use, my favorite kind of yogurt, let's see, coconut yogurt. And I like to use this kind. It's based on coconut milk instead of dairy milk. And I like to use this one. You can use it unsweetened, right? So I've got the unsweetened and use some of that. So that's what we're going to use. There's also an oat milk based dairy-free yogurt. I'm not crazy for the oat one. Like, I don't know, I don't like how it tastes, so I don't usually do that one. And the other thing, gotta get back here because I forgot it. The other thing is you're going to need some milk in it as well. Now, I can't do milk, and so you're going to need a dairy-free milk. So I like to use this one, Earth's Own oat milk. Now, this is a Canadian company, so you may not get it where you are, but some kind of variety of oat milk. You could use almond milk. You could use rice milk for this, probably, and because it's in the recipe, it bakes, so you could probably use that. And so you're going to need one of those. So let's get to it finally. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is get our dry ingredients together. So we got our gluten-free 1-to-1 flour blend. We'll do that. We've got some sugar, so a little bit of sugar goes in with that. You'll be able to find the recipe or a link to my recipe below this video. And then we have baking powder, baking soda, and salt. So that's been added in. Just I'm going to grab my whisk here and we're going to blend that together. So, if you've been watching any of my videos for any kind of length of time, I like a good whisk. So yeah, so I do this. You don't really need a whisk, but I just find that I like how it blends it in. Okay, so the next thing after we blended the dry together, we're going to need to take our dairy-free butter. So, it's a vegan style butter, right? And we're going to need to take that out of the wrapping. We want it to be quite cold still. So you don't need to thaw the margarine out. Well, okay, butter, whatever we're calling it. Let's call it butter, even though it isn't. We're going to cut it into pieces and put it in to okay, so this is a half a cup. So one stick. That's why I like to buy it in the sticks. Okay, hold on a second. Because man, am I just like, okay, let me just cut it right here on the counter and then flick these guys in here. So we want it kind of just out of the fridge sort of thing. We don't need to thaw this butter out. Like I say, I'm using the term butter, even though it really isn't butter, but you get the idea. It's a dairy-free butter, right? So it's a dairy-free butter. So really, in essence, it is kind of like a margarine, but there's absolutely no dairy in it. You got to be careful with margarines, like using just any old margarine, because if you have to be dairy-free or someone in your life has to be, and they're very sensitive to dairy, or maybe they're even allergic to it, then you need to be very careful because I'm just going to wipe my hands here. You got to be very careful because a lot of margarines actually have dairy in it. So we're going to cut this butter in with the dry, and I like to use a pastry blender, and we're going to get that all incorporated in there. Now, look, you can see where it sticks to my pastry blender. I take my knife now and just get it off of there, like get the blobs off of there as best I can, and then we go again. So we're going to get that all incorporated in. Here we go again. We're going to have to get the butter off of there again. So it takes a bit of time. It's going to take a few minutes. It's probably the most tedious part of this is doing this, right? What I'm doing right now is probably the worst part. It's the most frustrating part, I think. You can also use another thing that I like to do, because if see me, I like short-handled spoons because I like to get right in there and do things with as close with my hands as I can. So another thing you could do, especially when you get to this part where it's kind of in, but it's kind of being a pain to get it in, and you have clean hands, you could just, okay, here I'm going to do it with my hands. So I'm like, literally, you could mix this up with your hands and make sure your hands are very clean. But, so I just do that and just kind of put it through my fingers like this. So we're going to make that butter incorporate. Now I'm going to do this quickly because I don't want that butter to heat up too much in there, right? So I don't want it to make, I've made nice warm butter, I want it to just, so I'm kind of putting my fingers and just blending it through like that, because we just want the butter pieces to be small and through that. So, so we don't want great big hunks of butter in there. So this is another way to cut butter in. You could also use two knives, or you could, use a fork or two knives, and that's another way to do that. So, we want kind of them to be like little bits of butter, like just fine in there. So that's what we want to do. You could even rub them between your hands, but I really don't suggest too much rubbing between the hands, like between the palms or the fingers. That way we want to not warm up that butter too much. Okay, I'm going to get in with I don't mind getting dirty, getting things all over my hands, but there's not great big hunks of butter in that, right? So that's the next thing we're going to do. I'm going to just wipe my hands off and we'll get to that next part. All right, so we're going to set that aside for a moment. We're going to get another bowl. Just it doesn't have to be very big, so a bowl this size. And this is where we're going to put our sour cream. It's a half a cup, but like I say, you can find the recipe or a link to my recipe, I should say. Link to the DRK, Dietary Restriction Kitchen website, and the recipe for this will be on the website. And so put the sour cream in a bowl. We're going to add a little bit of oat milk, so it's like a quarter of a cup of oat milk. So we're going to mix those guys together. And, here I'm just going to use that same whisk to really get it incorporated together. Then we're going to take this back that we have. We're going to put this in with the dry ingredients. And I'm scraping my bowl. Sorry about the sound of that. That may be a little bit bothersome sound. Okay. And we're going to mix that up together. You can use a fork for this as well. Okay, so there we got a fork. Press it together like that. Kind of like pressing it down together. I'm going to try to get all that dry ingredients or sort of the wet in with the dry. So sort of pressing all that together. So it's going to look kind of crumbly, a little bit crumbly at this point. So you can see that it's getting moistened. It's kind of coming together. Okay. And then I'm going to get my surface ready because we're going to need the countertop. So we'll be right back with that. Okay, so we're going to take a little bit more of our Bob's Red Mill gluten-free 1-to-1 flour blend. I'm just going to put a little bit in my hand and I'm going to just put it right on the countertop and just spread it a little bit because we want to put the dough on here. So remember our dough, it's kind of crumbly like that. We're going to take that like this, and the reason why we're going to put it into a ball. So it's going to be kind of like this. So we're kind of like right in the bowl first. We're just going to kind of make a ball out of it, right? So we're going to press it all together to make a ball. Okay. So yeah, like that. And so we got most of it in a ball. So then we're going to bring it and put it right on that counter that we've got the flour on. I'm just going to press the rest of that out of the bowls and then press it right in there. Get rid of my bowl now. So you can see that it's incorporated. So now we're going to just knead it about 8 times. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. So I'm going to need a little bit more flour. Just reach back here for my flour and put it here. So now you can roll that out with a rolling pin or you can just pat it out. Now, some people like to make a shortcake as one big shortcake. I tend to not do that because I'm just moving it to make sure it doesn't stick. What I like to do is cut them into individual portions, right? So we want these to be quite, here, even like flick it over if you want. So yeah, so we want to make it so that's why I'm moving it as I do this so it doesn't stick. So you can pat it down so into that disc sort of thing. You can make one big one if you wanted, or we're going to make, but in my case, I'm going to make individual ones. So if you wanted to take a rolling pin to this, you definitely could, but can I still move this? Not really. It's okay because once I get them off, it'll be fine. Okay, so see, because you could do this and make a round and then transfer it and do one big one if you wanted. I find that's kind of, almost making like a cake with it, right? So, but I don't like to do that. So what we can do is you take a cutter, like quite a big one, like a 3-inch one, or you can also use something like this. You could score it this way and just make little triangles out of it. But let's try our cutter. So we're going to cut individual rounds. As you can see, that come out pretty nicely there, right? So they're quite thick, and we're going to put them on pan. I'll show you that pan in a minute. So we're going to try to get 6 out of here. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to do one to grow on here, and probably off camera, I'll end up having an 8th one. Okay, so I've taken the rest of the dough, put it together again, patted it out again, and I'm going to make a couple more here. So I have 7, 8. Again, you can go again. So, if you're doing individual ones, you can get at least 6, and it looks like I'm going to get more than that. But it depends on how thick you want these guys as well, right? So, you can make them like pretty thick, but like I've got them like that, but and I mean, any leftovers, you could still use it for shortcakes, or you could just have it as a sweet bit, slightly more sweet biscuit. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do one more. There we go. So there. Now, set that aside. And then we've got our pan of the biscuits this way. See, this one's kind of a little bit skinny on the one side. But anyway, we've got that. So that might be my trial one if it works. So there we go. There's that. Sorry, I didn't have my implement there. What we're going to do with it now is take a little bit more of the oat milk in a bowl, and we're gonna lightly brush the tops of the shortcakes. So we're gonna do that and brush them lightly on the top here with a bit of oat milk, or whatever of the kind of milk you're using. So if you were using almond milk, you would use that, or if you're using rice milk, you'd use that. I've used, in my case, using oat milk. So we're gonna do a little bit on the top with that, and just a little tiny bit. Just get them a little bit moist on the top. And then we're going to take our sugar, take a little bit of sugar, additional sugar, and we're going to sprinkle a little bit on the tops of these. So sprinkle a little bit of sugar on the top. This is going to make it like, we're going to add the sweetness to the biscuit here this way. Now, if you didn't want to do this part, don't do it. Like, if you don't look, I don't want to add more sugar. I don't want to brush oat milk or whatever milk on the top, then don't, right? But this is, I mean, that's kind of optional, but there we go. We're going to put these in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes. So at least 20 minutes in a 425-degree oven. So we'll do that. Okay, so little tip. Now, we got those baking, our little shortcakes baking in the oven. A little tip about getting the flour and whatnot off your counter. These little guys, just a little plastic thing, is really great. You can find that. I don't know if you can find them at a dollar store, but if anywhere that sells baking supplies or whatever, you should be able to find one. It's called a bench scraper. So this is just a little plastic one, so it won't harm your countertops. But it's great for scraping off this. I'm just going to scrape that, onto a plate, get rid of it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we've got our strawberries, right? So while our shortcakes are baking, we can get our strawberries ready. Let me just adjust the camera a little bit. There we go. And get our strawberries ready. So what we're going to do is I wash those first off, and we are going to cut them, which I don't have a knife, just one sec. Okay, so we got the strawberries there. Hold it. I'm like, wow, got everything like piled up close to me here. So I'm just going to move those strawberries over. And I've got a bowl here as well. So what I'm going to do, because I'm left-handed too, I'm going to put my cutting board to the left of me and then the bowl to my right. So, okay. So I had to find a little knife. I'm going to use just this little one. Seems like my family last night, when I was out shopping, grocery shopping, was using my knives, my favorite knives and stuff, and they're now dirty. So, okay. So I'm just going to chop the tops off for that, and we're just going to cut these up. You can make it as small or as big as you like. That's pretty big strawberries, so I'm going to cut it pretty small. We're going to get our strawberries all cut up, and we'll be right back. Okay, last strawberry. Cut that up. I think I got to check on my shortcakes here in just a second. So we got that all in the bowl. Going to check on the shortcakes. Okay, so I've taken my shortcakes out and just to check them, and you can see they look quite golden, and I'm looking on the bottoms and they're quite done. So that I'm just going to set them aside to let them cool. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to fix up those strawberries though. So we finished cutting up our strawberries. You can make them as big or as little as you like. I like to sort of quarter them. If I get an extra big one, I like to make it a little, cut it up a little bit more fine. You could cut them really small if you wanted. You do you with that. I've got a little bit of lemon juice because that's going to keep it from, you don't, as much or little of that as you want. You can use the rest of that sugar that we had previously, when we were dusting the top. So you can put the sugar in. I like to do that. Or you can also use some honey to sweeten it a little bit. Now, if you don't want to sweeten your strawberries, you don't have to. Oh, I'm bad today with where are my implements? Okay, so I'm going to just toss that together. So we have strawberries, a little bit of honey in there, and some lemon juice. So yeah, and what I like to do at this point, what did a little leaf get in there? Okay, so what I like to do is take a little piece, and of course you got to check. My family's going to probably want that sweeter. Mm-hmm. I don't mind a little tartness, but especially with my husband, he's going to want that sweeter. So there we go. Now, sometimes if people want, you can also cook up your strawberries on the stove a little bit, and kind of almost make well, not mash it or anything, but kind of like a compote with it. And you could do that with the strawberries. I don't really like to do that too much because I find if I do that, but then it really, I don't know, makes it too jammy for me. So I like to do it this way, but feel free to warm them up on the stove if you want. I'm going to add a little bit more lemon juice. And so it's not a real exact science. You can see there's quite a bit of a juiciness at the bottom, but when we serve this out, we're going to just slotted spoon this, so we got to make sure when you're serving out for your shortcakes that they're completely cooled off. So I got to wait till this shortcake's cool, and then we'll put it together and we'll have the magic ingredients because we need some cream for this as well. And we want to make it a dairy-free sort of whipped cream. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put it all together next. Okay, so now we got our shortcakes, and I'm going to take a knife, and I'm just going to use like a little knife like this, and just cut it in half down. Now, this is still a bit warm, so I would suggest letting them cool off completely. But so now you got the two halves. So we're going to get a little plate to put that on. So we got our two halves. There's our bottom half, and that's our top half. So then what we're going to do is take a little bit of the strawberries that we prepared before, put them over the top of that. It doesn't really matter. They get messy in there. That's fine. Maybe a little bit more around. So like that. And then we're going to take our secret ingredient here, which is I like to use, this stuff here. So it's a So Delicious cocoa whip. So it's almost like a dream whip or whatever, but it does not have any dairy in it. So I'm going to try to get it open. It's a bit tricky. And it looks like this. And you can keep it in the freezer. And then what you do with it is you just thaw it out in the fridge. And there you go. We're going to get a scoop of that. Pardon my there we go, and put that on, and you put the top of this guy on here, and you can put some more. Now, this is what's great. You could put ice cream with this as well, and there we go. You put ice cream, if you have a dairy-free ice cream, wonderful for that as well. And let's give this a try. There you have it, strawberry shortcake. My cream is kind of trying to slide off of my biscuit, but let's give this a try here. Oh my gosh. And it's messy to eat. It's messy, but good. Really nice. Get some strawberry in there. With some cream. Lovely. Excuse me. Really lovely. Really fun little dessert to make. Once in a while, once in a great while. You could use other fruit too. Doesn't have to be strawberries, but of course, for Canada Day, we want the red fruit because they're red and white. But you could use any fruit you like. It's absolutely wonderful. Hope you give it a try. Thanks for stopping by today and visiting me here in the Dietary Restriction Kitchen. See you next time, and happy Canada Day. If you're here in Canada, happy Independence Day. If you're in the States, and whatever national celebrations you have in your country, elsewhere, I hope you have a wonderful time. Bye for now.